Okay, hey everybody, thanks for joining. It's 1 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started on this webinar. So the topic of this webinar was we're going to talk about the FY22 Regional Conservation Partnership Program funding announcement. There was a funding announcement, similar webinar that was made by National RCPP team last week. This kind of complements that with more of an Oregon perspective. And so I'm Tom Miewald, I'm the RCPP Coordinator based out of Portland, Oregon. And to help me kind of paint that Oregon picture of RCPP, I also have Jay Gibbs, who's the Basin Team Lead for John Day and Umatilla region. And I want to thank Lauren Bennett for helping shepherd us through this as well. So thanks. Moving on. So the goals of this, the main goal is really we want to help you make strong proposals for the RCPP. So that's really the main purpose of this. If you are not considering for this year putting in a proposal, this is a great opportunity to learn about RCPP and what you would think about in future years where you do put it together. If you're not, if you just want to learn about RCPP, you're welcome as well. I think you'll learn a lot about the program and maybe get you interested in thinking about ideas for doing an RCPP project. So yeah, we want to build awareness of the program. Like I said, we want to add to that national RCPP webinar with a little bit more color from the Oregon perspective. We want to help you think through, this is a unique RCPP in that there's a classic, RCPP classic, and what we call the alternative funding arrangement or AFA. And we've never done this before where they came out at the same time. So hopefully provide some information that helps you figure out which way to go. And then most importantly, want to address any questions that you all have out there. So I'm going to just talk about the funding announcement essentials here really quickly. The deadline, remember this, the deadline is April 13th, 2022. If you go beyond that, then you'll have to wait till next year. So one thing is don't wait until the last minute on this. There's some things that you need to get in place for the biggest, one of the big things is you have to get e-authentication. Go to the national website and it'll tell you how to go through that process. It could take 2 to 5 days. I've seen it happen, take just a few days, but you never know. You don't want to wait till the last minute. And you definitely want to start working with NRCS field staff early and often through the process. Also, just want to bring up administrative priorities under this funding announcement: climate smart agriculture, urban agriculture, and racial justice and equity. So, if your proposal doesn't necessarily hit on those straight on, you can still submit a proposal and hopefully bring in elements of those into your project. But those are the administrative priorities that are articulated in the funding announcement. So with that, I think those are kind of the key things that we want to get across. I'm going to walk through more slides that get into the nitty gritty of RCPP. But before we do that, I just want to give some time to Jay Gibbs. He's the Basin Team Lead out east in Eastern Oregon, and he has spent years working with NRCS and working through RCPP projects since its inception in 2015. So I'll hand it over to you, Jay, to talk a little bit about Oregon and our approach to RCPP and strategic conservation.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. It's always good to see the cross section of partners and projects that are being spooled up and talked about for RCPP in Oregon. Oregon's a real diverse state, and so it stands to reason we'd have a very diverse cross-section of applications. Oregon is one of the most successful, if not the most successful state in the nation in regards to RCPP proposals. As far as the number we've got, I think we have close to 30 active RCPP proposals right now, active in every corner of the state. And I think this is in large part due to Oregon's strategic approach to conservation, which in a very simplistic is it's focusing money on a very finite resource concern, on a very finite landscape to move the needle forward. And that said, I would say that a lot of times when I'm talking to folks I use a layer cake analogy, and I've seen a lot of successful applications that they take a very narrow slice of the landscape and they go very deep and address a lot of resource concerns and a lot of issues, or they're very shallow. They take that first layer off, they have a little broader footprint, but they only maybe one or two practices deep. Both of those seem to be successful strategies from a competitive perspective. Oregon's strategic approach to conservation is largely implemented at the local level with the leadership of our district conservationists and our partners. Our conservation implementation strategies are typically in the hundreds or maybe thousands of acres and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Many successful RCPP proposals started out as a conservation implementation strategy, and then based on some synergy and some volume and some interest, they scaled up to a lot more, a larger footprint, and maybe something in the 2 to 3 to 5 million, the millions of dollars from an implementation perspective. I think the CISs are implementation strategies. One of the things that's a key piece of that is a really clear line of sight between the problems you're identifying and the practices you're installing. Sometimes it's easy to get a little distracted, and we do a lot of good stuff on the landscape, and there's a lot of ancillary or secondary or tertiary benefits to what we're doing. But the better you can articulate your problem, the practices, and the outcome, not outputs, but outcomes, I think the more competitive you'd be. I guess the last thing I would leave this in mind with is just how the approval process works, at least within the state of Oregon. We typically have several applications. I would encourage you to meet early and meet often with your district conservationist and your basin team leader. Have them aware of and involved in and helping add some value to your application. The process that happens at a basin level, like out here in the John Day, Umatilla, and Snake Basin, we'll have multiple applications within the basin, and Ron Alvarado, the state conservationist, will ask us at the basin level to review and rank those applications internal to each basin. And then those are aggregated at the state level. And then Ron works with some of the principal staff in the state office and some of the other members of Oregon's leadership team to include basin team leaders. And we in turn prioritize the RCPP applications for the state of Oregon. And we send that up to the national headquarters. So the worst time for me as a basin team leader to see your application is at the review period. That really kind of puts me and you at a competitive disadvantage. So work with your district conservationist, your team leader, work with them early, work with them often. This is a great tool in their toolbox to move conservation forward. I'll be around all throughout the presentation if any questions come up. And with that, I'll kick it back over to you, Tom.
Great. Thanks so much, Jay. Those are great words. So moving forward, RCPP is a national program. It's about 225 million nationally that's used through RCPP. Just a few kind of key points here that in Oregon, we're using it as a way to be really strategic about conservation at the landscape and watershed scale. So how do we work collaboratively with partners to leverage resources to work on a project through that partnership? That's really what RCPP is about. Typically in Oregon, it's about $10 to $20 million per year for multiple projects. Last year, we had 17 million for 5 projects across the landscape. It's an evolving program, and that evolution is really driven by national, since this is a national program. And it started off Farm Bill 14 as, basically taking NRCS programs like EQIP and CSP and trying to package them together in a broader project. It's really evolved into having their own standalone programs or practices and activities and different ways of doing easements, and you can do land rentals. So it's developed into a pretty innovative program within NRCS, and there's a lot of great flexibilities that you can take advantage of. I want to make it clear that, RCPP is not a grant. It's not a situation where you get a few $1 million. We say see you later in 5 years. You're working very closely with NRCS and the field staff through a project-based partnership. That's really what RCPP is. You're focused on a project with particular resource concerns through this partnership. The national webinar went over the 4 pillars, but I think this is really important, and I'll go over it pretty briefly here. So impact, making sure that the project you're proposing has a high conservation value within the landscape you're talking about. We must have the second pillar is contributions, having at least a 1-to-1 partner contribution, and that could be cash match, technical assistance. Innovation is an important part of our RCPP. We want to be funding the future of conservation. What can we do and scale up at a broader scale? Maybe a great conservation innovation grant idea that can be scaled up into an RCPP is, for example. And then project management. There is a lot of project management working through different contracts and budgets and agreements, and having that ability and skill and practice of strong project management is really critical. I'll talk about each of these pillars later on as I give you kind of tips and tricks to think about the proposal writing process. So in Oregon, I'm going to go back and kind of talk about kind of our portfolio of projects. Since 2015, like Jay said, we've been very successful with RCPP. It really fits in with our approach here. We've had 32 projects. That's almost $90 million in NRCS funding, and then combined with that partner contribution of about 120 million, that's over 200 million invested in strategic conservation over a 7-year period. So that's a significant investment in sustainable, resilient landscapes for producers, for conservation, for water resources. Currently, we have 21 projects, which I'll show here in this map, and that's about 51 million across the landscape right now. So each one of these projects, as you think about writing your proposal, think about the scale and the scope. So each one of these green polygons represents an RCPP project, and kind of the funny icons next to them represent the key resource concerns that the RCPP is trying to address. For example, there's a lot in the northern coast, several projects focused on salmon habitat restoration, also in the lower John Day, upper John Day as well. We have several irrigation modernization projects. We have projects that are focused on upland habitat. For example, in the Willamette Valley, we have 2 great projects that are focused on oak restoration. We have one that's focused on waterfowl down here in the Klamath, and we have a number of forest resiliency projects. So what each one of these projects did was they worked with NRCS to think, what is the appropriate scale and scope of the RCPP to make sure that we can be actionable and actually helping move the needle on these resource concerns. And so that's a really important part as you develop the proposal, getting that scope and scale of your RCPP right. So just to give you a sense of how we have them distributed across the landscape in Oregon right now. And I'm going to focus in a little bit on one of our projects, the Lower John Day Canyon Restoration Initiative, RCPP. This one was funded 2 years ago. The lead partner plays a very important role in the RCPP, Gilliam Soil and Water Conservation District, and they work closely with NRCS in getting practices out on the landscape, working with partners and planning to get things to work through different agreements and contracts. So it's a really important part to get that strong lead partner role. And then you can also see that there's a number of participating partners. It's great to have that diversity as you think about your proposal, to have state agencies. We have a tribe involved. We have an NGO, OWEB has been a solid partner in so many of our RCPPs. So kind of think about who can contribute either finances or either technical assistance, get them on your team. And you want to get letters from each of them as well as you develop your proposal. So the goal of this project is to enhance 40 miles of critical habitat and steelhead. And so for steelhead, and one of the things that they did is they really combined a lot of different practices, including fencing, beaver dam analog structures, riparian plantings. And also the great thing, they took they're combining easements along with the land management practices. And then for innovation, they're using drone technology for monitoring. So that really makes a very compelling proposal to see that kind of innovation thrown in with different practices, actionable geography, resource concern is focused, it's important in that geography, and then you have a broad suite of partners. So that makes a nice kind of package, something like that. In order to apply for RCPP, you need to be an eligible lead partner. So in Oregon, I've listed each, I'll go through these and I'll say which ones we have in Oregon. A state or local government, for example, ODF, Oregon Department of Forestry, Indian Tribe, we're working with Warm Springs as a lead partner. Conservation districts is a common lead partner that we work with collaboratively across all of these different counties. Farmer cooperative, water district or irrigation district. For example, we work with the Three Sisters Irrigation District and the East Fork Hood River Irrigation District. Municipal water, wastewater treatment entity, institution of higher education. And then kind of the bigger bucket is this, any entity that has an established history of working with producers on agricultural land. And so that could be an NGO, it could be a watershed council, it could be pretty much any group that is working with partners and can lead a pretty large project like an RCPP. So just to give you a sense of this, as you develop your proposal, it's very important to pick who your lead partner will be, because they will be scrutinized for their ability to manage a project, and also they'll be kind of the key communication with NRCS throughout the life of the project. Just a high level overview of the 5 years of an RCPP, and I'll go through this pretty quick. So you are kind of up here in this quadrant where you've done some partnership and project development. You've hopefully worked with NRCS and field offices and the Basin Team Leads, and now you're kind of at the stage of proposal development. And so you want to engage with the field and Basin Team Leaders, keep me involved as well, so that we can make sure that your proposal meets the kind of the standards to get through successfully. Let's say your project gets funded, we move to the next stage of a programmatic partnership agreement. And that doesn't really obligate funds, but it lays out kind of the structure and the roles and responsibilities and how you're going to monitor outcomes. And that, if you've done a lot of good work in this section, this should go pretty quickly. Typical time is a couple months to get that finally approved and to move on to kind of the bulk of year one, which is outreach and planning and developing agreements. Kind of year one, for some, it's kind of working through a lot of different, getting things moving. For some, they're ready to go and hit the ground running. Years 2 to 5 is really focused on implementation heavily. And then year 5 is, you can start thinking about a renewal, which is a non-competitive continuation of the RCPP, or you can also think about a 1-year extension as well. If not, think about monitoring and putting your outcomes together that you'll put together at the end of the project. So just a quick kind of schematic of what an RCPP classic would look like. So the partnership is the NRCS and the lead partner. Again, like I said, that's the key kind of relationship that is built throughout this process. But then there's also these contributing partners that you've identified. We develop an agreement, and really kind of the core of a classic project is that you're focused on resource concerns, financial assistance that can go through any number of these different activity types, we call them. So land management are your land management contracts like EQIP or CSP, and we typically obligate that through producer contracts. Rentals is a new one, so it's kind of like CRP, where up to 7 years you can do a producer can get payments for land being for a number of different uses. Easements, we have 2 different kinds of new easement types: entity and US held easements, and then watershed type capabilities as well. So, all of these activities are meant to help landowners do things on their land that get to the final conservation outcomes. So for the AFA, it's going to look a little bit different, where the lead partner has a bigger role in the process. NRCS, not so much. Everything else kind of looks the same, except for there's going to be more options in how you get payments to landowners to do conservation work through land management or rentals. You can open up to more kind of innovative things that the NRCS can't do. We're bound to our contracting approaches to get funds to landowners to do particular things based upon practice standards. Here you can do things like pay for success or pay for different types of implementations or different types of payments to producers based upon what you think would work for that resource concern and landscape. So that's a big difference between classic and AFA. There's just a little bit, there's more flexibility to do different things in kind of this stage of resource concerned focused financial assistance. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because they covered this, but the RCPP budget is kind of looks like this. It's financial assistance to landowners is 70% of the project. And then we have different amounts of technical assistance. 25% goes to the lead partner to use as they see fit. And then at least 5% goes to NRCS. This will be kind of worked through in the agreement stage if the program is accepted. But as you develop your proposal, think through what kind of things that you feel like you need for project management, communications, for technical assistance on the ground, and how you're going to, by year, how you're going to spend the financial assistance for that, for your proposed project. Outcomes are important. I'm just going to kind of go through this really quickly. So the key thing for this, as you develop your proposal and the resource concerns, articulate how you're going to monitor, model, or measure the outcomes of this. So if, what's the impact of salmon populations if you are doing a aquatic habitat based? What's the impact to oak woodlands if you're doing something related to terrestrial habitat? And how are you going to measure that? What are meaningful metrics? And you can put some budget in to do that kind of monitoring and measuring. So think through that as you develop your proposal. That's an important part. We have what's called critical conservation, two different pools of funding. One is critical conservation areas, and the other is the state multi-state. So this brown polygon up that covers California, Oregon, Northwest, and Washington is really, this is the Western Waters Critical Conservation Area. So you might be in this area. If you are, you need to show that your proposal addresses these resource concerns: inadequate habitat, insufficient water and drought, and water quality and degradation. If they don't, even if you're in the brown blob and your proposal doesn't address any of those three concerns, please don't apply in the CCA, because that's it won't go well. So now I want to go into a few kind of steps, tips on writing a proposal. And again, I'm going to focus it around these 4 pillars that we talk about so much in RCPP. So the first is impact. So as we review these proposals, some things that we'll be thinking about, and I can't stress enough that I know that the RCPP portal is a little odd in that you have to, you're given this box to write your text in and particular questions. It's not like there's a flow and a narrative that you can slowly build up. So through a kind of a more of a text-based or a multi-paragraph document. So it's a little different. So, but make sure that, particularly for those going the AFA route, that you articulate the problem in the geography and be clear on the link between your proposed actions and the conservation outcome. So think about, what is a theory of change that gets you from A to B, and from conservation action to conservation outcome. Being able to clearly define, like I just said, talking about outcomes, being able to clearly define how and what will be measured, we look at that. Like I talked about earlier, the scale and the scope of the project area, can you make an impact on the resource concern with that area? Will the project generate substantial conservation benefits? And those benefits are likely to be achieved. Is it achievable? So is what you're proposing achievable? The people reviewing the proposals know what's achievable in many of these situations. So make a clear picture of how that works. I think that's That's going to be really important. The impact part of the proposal is one of the most important parts. So, so work on that one and make sure you get review. The second pillar is partner contribution. So there needs to be at least a 1-to-1 ratio of contributions for contributions, cash versus in kind. Those are the two typical kinds. Cash gets a higher percentage of cash gets a higher score in the overall proposal versus in kind technical assistance. So keep that in mind. We realize that some of the contributions that you might be getting or putting into the proposal might be pending. You haven't, finalized what that you've received that proposal, that grant or whatever yet. So try to, and that's okay. But if the proposal does get funded and that funding falls through, you'll need to find a way to make up the funding amount. So partner contributions are meaningful and complement the financial assistance and technical technical assistance. Don't just ask for random, don't just throw in random partner contributions that aren't aligned with the resource concerns, not in the boundary or outside of the time frame of the RCPP. So those are kind of 3 criteria to think about. And it's a pretty broad definition of what a partner contribution can be, as long as it falls within the geography related to the resource concern and falls within the time frame of the project. Innovation, again, is an important part of RCPP. So we'll be looking at your proposed innovations and either planning, implementation, or monitoring. If you have a project that is based upon an innovative landscape scale plan or assessment, you're taking the Oregon Conservation Strategy or something and looking at one of their priority places, and you're using that as the guide. Yeah, we look at things like that as we rate these. If you can articulate the way that our NRCS programs are combined, and if you're taking advantage of some of the unique programmatic elements afforded by RCPP, we look at that. And a key thing is that you have to really talk about why RCPP is the right program for you. Can this be, we'll think about whether this can be carried out through, say, PL 566. Maybe that's a better route to go, or maybe just through straight equip contracts in the geography. So really, you have to make a case of why RCPP, and again, we're happy to help think through that with you if you reach out. And then kind of one of the final pillars here is project management experience. So having that experience as a lead partner in managing a project like this, having a realistic time frame for the things that you're proposing, understanding working with NRCS and understanding how NRCS works in terms of our practice standards and our contracting approaches, that really helps. And if you can point to situations where you've worked with NRCS on the proposal, that's good. It's really important to think about historically underserved producers explicitly in the process. Try to find a way to make the project actually meaningful to historically underserved producers and articulate that. Don't just kind of say, we will reach out to historically underserved producers and that's it. I mean, that if that's the least you can do that, you can do that. But if you can kind of think through a more mature kind of way of working with historically underserved producers, that would be great. A great part of the proposal, and a definition of historically underserved is given down at the bottom. And then some final considerations, like I'll probably repeat this again, but working early and often with the Basin Team Leads and DCs through the proposal writing process. Be explicit about your resource concerns and what you're trying to, and how the work that you're going to do meets those. Have a well-written proposal, get it proofread. Especially for the AFA, we'll go to a national review team where there'll be only 15 that will be selected versus the classic where it's mostly reviewed internally by the state. So make sure that you're writing in a way that people all across the country will understand the problem and the solution that you're proposing. So support from leaders in the community and region. There's no place you can upload letters of support into the portal, but if you could get that support and it's communicated to NRCS, that's always, it doesn't hurt. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about the alternative funding arrangement and how to kind of think about if you want to go the classic or the AFA route. So like I said, it's a little bit more competitive, actually a lot more competitive with the AFA. They are only authorized up to fund up to 15 projects. It's not a grant, but it operates a little bit more like a grant, where there's a lot more kind of emphasis played on the lead partner's role. NRCS kind of just plays the role of inherently governmental activities like NEPA and things like that. So I'm going to walk through a few examples of why you would go to AFA. So use AFA if you think you have there's a really high premium placed on innovative ideas as they discuss and review these proposals. So maybe it's a good CIG project that is ready for scaling up. Things like pay for performance are unique ways of providing payments, like I talked about earlier, that NRCS can't do. We really look at that and in order to choose whether it goes the AFA or the classic route. If the lead partner has the ability to take on most of the project management responsibilities and outreach to partners, and then just being able to articulate that in a good proposal, really. If all those line up, I think go AFA. If your proposal can be done through classic, I would say stay with classic. So yeah, that's kind of the key thing there. I'm just going to go through one example of the alternative funding arrangement. Of a successful one that we reviewed last year. So this is looking at healing mine-scarred landscapes via reforestation in Kentucky or Tennessee. I can't quite remember which one. But the general idea was to scale up and offer landowners reforestation practices plus conservation easements to restore forests and mine-scarred landscapes. It scored high with the AFA review team because it had this innovative conservation financing aspect where there was private financing from carbon credit reforestation. So basically, getting paid for carbon credits in the future, and then using that to pay back private financing for some of those easements. And then the AFA combines NRCS funded restoration with partner funded working land easements. So just to kind of give you a sense of the type of projects that I've seen get funded in the AFA are ones that have a kind of an alternative funding way to get funds to lead partners or to people on the ground. So I'll just go through one of those. I had two, but I think I'll just go through one. And then finally, I'm going to talk a little about some of the RCPP easement benefits. It's a little different than our classic ASAP ALE or the HFRP. So for one difference is that there's a targeted funding around resource concern. So it's not RCPP easement is focused on the resource concern. It's not focused on like WREs are focused on wetlands. HFRP is focused on forest. ALE is focused on agricultural land. Basically any land cover type, as long as it addresses the resource concern on the property's landowner, can be included into that easement. So with RCPP, you get technical assistance. So one of the nice things is that gives you project management and outreach abilities to, you have that assistance to help get through the easement. The cash requirement is a little different, and it can be a combination of landowner donation and partner cash. The easement holder does not need to be the lead partner. And then there's also a buy, protect, sell transaction that can be done through RCPP easements. My last slide on the RCPP easements is that it's really based upon this concept of a minimum deed that is based upon different conservation, different levels of restriction for conservation. So highly restrictive is 100% funding for the easement value. Moderately restrictive is up to 75% of the easement value. And then minimally restrictive, our NRCS will cover up to 50% of the easement value for the minimally restrictive easement. So just there's going to be an upcoming webinar on easements. I just wanted to throw out a few kind of key things about RCPP easements. This will go into much more detail and depth if your project is thinking of including easement activities in your proposal. Please attend this webinar. If you need this information, email me, let me know. but that'll be February 10th at noon Pacific time. So I'm at my last slide here. So last thought, I said I'd say it again, but work early and often with your local NRCS staff and project as you work through your project ideas. And please let me know and contact me if your submittal, if you're going to submit a proposal. I strongly urge that we take some time to walk through key parts of the proposal to make sure that, particularly with resource concerns, that you've chosen the right thing so it doesn't cause problems later down the road if your project is funded. So I'm here to help walk through any of the policy and administrative side of things, work with Jay and other Basin team leads and your DCs on the ground project ideas. And so, yeah, I hope that this was a useful overview of the proposal, of the announcement, and some key things to consider as you embark or think about embarking down RCPP proposal. So with that, I will open it up to any verbal or online text questions for the next 20 minutes or so. Okay, Randy.
Hey, Tom. Thanks for that. That was all really, really informative. I have just a quick question. I read somewhere in my research on this program that there is a possibility of including practices on federally held land where it is considered essential to achieving the overall project goal. Can you talk about a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, I have not seen that done in Oregon, but yes, there is that provision. You have to make a clear case that the work that's being done on the federal land has a contribution to and affects and impacts work done on private land. I'm trying to think of what kind of example are you thinking of?
Yeah, and well, and just for full disclosure, I'm here to learn. Basically, the idea that I have for RCP project is actually in southern Arizona, in the Colorado River Basin area. But essentially, it's a watershed restoration idea of returning perennial flow to a degraded landscape in far southern Arizona. It's about 15 miles from Mexico. And the most of this watershed, or a good chunk of this watershed, is privately held land, basically the bottom of it, where the riparian area has been essentially destroyed. But the basin, the creek basin at the bottom of the watershed, is bounded on both sides by two big pieces of national forest. And so working if the goal of the project were to be to repair the watershed and restore perennial flow, then working up into the sub drainages of the watershed will include, should include a big chunk of doing smaller gauge stream restoration or stream course restoration up into the bits of national forest on either side.
Right. Yeah. No. I can see that. I think that you would want to be careful as you write your proposal that you don't put all of the funds up in federal land. If it's another issue, I don't know if that's an issue, but national forest. So Forest Service partner contributions can't be counted because it's part of a USDA organization. So non-USDA federal partner contributions can count. That's kind of a side concern right now to the question. I think that when I've heard this talked about, it's kind of like NRCS really wants to put funds on private landowners' land, and if it's a compelling part of a portion of that pie chart that I showed earlier with the FA, I think I would keep it a minimal amount, something that's absolutely necessary to make things happen. I think if you put all of the FA into public lands, that probably wouldn't be competitive.
Okay, yeah, and that makes sense. And most of the, I mean, there are a lot of moving parts. There will be a lot of moving parts, I think, to this project, and doing that work on the landscape is only going to be part of what's being proposed anyway. So
Right.
it'll be a portion of that. However, it would be good to get the Forest Service involved and to work back upstream, basically, for some of that stuff. So so basically that's a long-winded way of saying it won't be an issue to make that part of the project too much of the FA.
Yeah, you really want to make the clear connection between the benefits to the landowner and the resource concern combined if you're going to go that way. But yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I can throw one more in there. It's a really mechanistic question, and I got a little bit of the answer, I think, from your last slide here, in how you were suggesting that people contact you. But if I'm thinking about this obviously for probably for next year's cycle. But if I am going to contact the district conservationist or the Basin Team Leader in this part of Arizona, how generally does that connection get made if you don't have any sort of professional connection already?
I think every state is different. I would talk to the RCPP coordinator in Arizona, how they would like to deal with that. I don't want to speak for Arizona, because Oregon has our way of doing things, and really kind of, it's a state specific kind of, each state has its own kind of program. So I would really reach out to the Arizona RCPP coordinator and ask them how they want to operate. Jay, unless you want to add something to that.
No, I ditto that. I mean, every state has an RCPP coordinator, and I'd reach out to them, start there, and then work your way down to the local field office.
Okay, that's perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for.
Looks like there's a question in the chat. Oh, is that, yeah, we'll be posting this webinar on YouTube if you want to rewatch. So yeah, I'll go give it the going once, going twice.
Yeah, this is Aaron Groth. I'm with Oregon State University Extension. There are forestry and natural resources extension agents, and then there are also 6 of us who are regional fire specialists based across the state. My colleague John Riz is here for Northeast Oregon, and I represent the coast. So I serve all of Columbia, Clatsop, Tillamook, and Lincoln counties, and I serve parts of Lane, Douglas. I serve all of Columbia, Clatsop, Lincoln, and Tillamook counties, and I serve parts of Lane, Douglas, Benton, Polk, Yamhill, Washington, and Multnomah counties. So anything I can do to contribute or offer different perspectives related to natural resources and fire, happy to do so. Thank you.
Great. No, that's great to hear. I would go to our website and in those geographies, and I'm going to bring it up right now if I can. But yeah, no, look at this website, and a lot of these it's kind of broken up into multiple field offices, but definitely talk with there, and it's broken up into north and south across your geography. So you'd want to talk with Heather Medina in the southern part, and then Leo Preston in the northern part to really get their feedback on your ideas, and maybe you can get a meeting together with them on an RCPP idea, include me in it, and maybe, you know, in the future we can get something going. But that's a great place to start with the Basin Team Leads. Now we have a number of projects. Well, we have one RCPP related to fire down here in Southern Oregon, working with the Umatilla. Okay. Well, thanks everybody. I'll ask one more time if there's any questions. If not, feel free to email me at any time, and we will get your questions answered. And hopefully, we'll see folks as we develop proposals and projects together. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Jay. And everybody else who was instrumental in pulling this off.
Thank you.